1942, the Solomon Islands, Palmyra, Canton. 1943, the Aleutians, North Africa, the Bismarcks. 1944, Normandy, the Admiralties, Saipan, Guam. Life for the Seabees during these hard war years was just one beachhead after the other. Airstrips, roads, pontoon causeways, jungle, water, and yet more jungle. And then quite suddenly, there were Hiroshima and VJ Day, and a man named MacArthur on the deck of a battleship with the representatives of a thoroughly smashed foe. Peace. It was wonderful. The Army, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, everyone wanted to go home. And it's safe to say that in the whole military establishment, no group wanted to get out of uniform and back to civilian life any more than the Seabees. You see, a good many Seabees were pretty well along in years for military men. Of course, you'd have to look hard and long to find a Seabee who was not proud of his outfit, proud of the work he'd done. But he was tired of working construction miracles. He was tired of the jungle and the mud and warm beer. He was tired of the military life. He'd been a worker before the war, an independent guy. Peace. Sure, it was wonderful. The Seabees went home that fall of 1945, had themselves one fine blowout, and then, well, they took a deep breath and went back to work. The face of America had sagged some during the war. It needed lifting, and it was up to the Seabees, now that they were home, to set it right, to start civilian production and building again. So that wizard of an electrician who took charge of wiring a jungle city in the Admiralty Islands put his skill to work on a new plant in Jersey. Those Seabees who bulldozed away half of the cocoa palms on New Georgia went on bulldozing, clearing the way for new roads in Texas and California. The men who laid steel matting for airstrips in the cold Aleutians began to work with a different kind of steel, adding notches to the skylines of New York and San Francisco. Those mechanics and drivers who kept equipment plowing through the volcanic ash of Iwo Jima and the mud of New Guinea are keeping fleets of diesel trucks moving on schedule out of Chicago, New Orleans, and a score of other cities. And those tough construction workers who labored man-killing hours building hospitals on one Pacific island after another as we moved west toward Japan are now scattered through the country saying can do to another construction must, post-war housing. Here's one of them, a typical Seabee. He was past 40 years of age when he got back from the war, and he was really beat up. But now, he's hard at work on a new housing project in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. It has been quite a while since he returned from the Pacific, and a new generation of workers has sprung up. Young men like this apprentice carpenter who was pedaling around on a bicycle about the time that his friend, the old Seabee, was being introduced to his first mosquito down by the equator. These men, the veterans, have half forgotten there ever was a military or an island named Guadalcanal. Half forgotten, we said. Trouble is, the peace 250,000 Seabees wanted is still uncertain. It has some catches in it and makes it tough to forget there ever was a war. We found ourselves in a situation where it looked as if preparedness was the only road to peace. Preparedness? Sure, he was for it, but he wanted others to do the preparing. He liked being a civilian with no strings attached. Okay, he's a civilian, fair enough. But just for the record, let's take a look around and see what is happening to that old outfit of his. When the going was rough, the Seabees were 250,000 strong. For every 50 Seabees in 1945, there is a single Seabee in 1950. That's the ratio, 1 to 50. Of course, those few Seabees still around are just as rough and just as ready as their old mates ever were. During maneuvers, they were up to their old miracles. And you can still find them at Little Creek, Virginia, at Coronada, and Port Hueneme. But that man-sized team has been whittled down to the point where it wouldn't be much to start with in the event of a national emergency. Understand, the Seabees don't need large forces for peacetime because naval construction work is done by civilians. That is Navy policy, to work within and for the benefit of the civilian economy by giving building contracts to civilian firms and by maintaining cordial relations with union labor. But the Seabees do need a strong reserve team, a team made up of foremen, journeymen, and apprentices, of ex-Seabees and would-be Seabees. So at the Bureau of Yards and Docks in Washington, D.C., where the Seabee destiny is controlled, Civil Engineer Corps officers are studying new construction techniques. And more important, they are drafting plans for the Seabee future if that emergency comes. They are making those plans on the simple assumption that next time, the United States would not have weeks to mobilize, not even days. It will be a matter of hours. So early in 1949, plans for a new Seabee Standby Reserve were drawn up by top-ranking Navy officers after seeking the practical advice of labor union officials and swiftly given administrative approval. Already in many cities, construction battalion reserve officer units had been formed, and lecturers kept these reservists abreast of important new developments in construction techniques. But the Standby Reserve would provide the broad base which the Seabees needed, that source of skilled manpower which could be tapped on short notice and whipped into a smoothly running team in time of crisis. Instead of "I was a Seabee," Americans again would be hearing "I am a Seabee." Because the Navy worked in close collaboration with union officials, the Seabee Standby Reserve is tailored for the working man, the trade unionist, the kind of person who doesn't cotton much to the military, but who has a conscience about his country's welfare. Like these carpenters, the veteran and the apprentice. The old Seabee figured that he'd done enough for one lifetime back in the early 40s when things were really rough in the Pacific. And the apprentice? Well, he had no military experience and didn't want any. He wanted to stay all civilian. But at a union meeting one night, the Seabee Standby Reserve was explained to them in forceful terms.
This meeting will now come to order. As usual, we will open this meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Gentlemen, your flags. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tonight, we will set aside our usual order of business to hear from our guest of the evening, Commander H.C. Johnson of the Civil Engineer Corps, United States Naval Reserve, who will explain the Seabee Reserve program to us. And I might add that this program is one that possesses certain definite advantages for those of us in the trades. Commander Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, gentlemen. My job here tonight is an easy one. Easy because all of you here know how to build, whether it's a house or a skyscraper. But you all know that in order to build anything, we must first have a set of plans, particularly in the construction of a future. The Civil Engineer Corps of the United States Navy has drawn up a blueprint for such a future. I refer to the Seabee Reserve program. As a member of the Seabee Reserve, you'll be working with men you know. You'll be doing work that you like and understand. And it'll also make it possible for you to be rated in the service of your choice, the Seabees. By enlisting in the Standby Reserve now, you'll preserve that choice. We want to keep the Seabees a skilled outfit for skilled men. In this inactive volunteer reserve, there are no military duties, no drills. and you'll only be called in the case of a national emergency. The rating structure is based on your civilian experience. As a foreman, a journeyman, or apprentice, you're eligible for a rating in the Seabee Reserve.
The Seabee Standby Reserve looked good to them, mighty good. But the Standby Reserve needs more than just carpenters to fill out its quota of 75,000. Carpentry is but one of a long list of eligible trades. Take bulldozer operators. The bulldozer comes close to being a Seabee trademark, and the men who run them are natural-born Seabees. These men are not kidding themselves either. They know they'll be in the thick of it if anything happens, and we Americans have to put out another fire in the world. The Seabee Standby Reserve is an ideal organization for them. Automotive drivers are needed. Surveyors. Electricians. Mechanics, both gasoline and diesel. The Standby Reserve is designed to get skilled men in the place where they'll do the most good. In time of war, mechanics like these men will find that it's better to do the work they know best and work beside other men like themselves who know their jobs. Masons and concrete men will form an important part of the Seabee Standby Reserve. Construction equipment operators are wanted. Sawmill operators. Pile driver operators. Steel workers. Steel workers have an independence all their own. They like to make sure about things. Well, there's no catch in the Standby Reserve. It means what it says. There's nothing in small type. In the utilities field, there are several rates open in the Standby Reserve. Plumbers and pipe fitters. Boiler room operators. Steam fitters. Stationary engineers. Firemen. Water supply and sanitation men. In each of these trades, the Navy rate received by the reservist is based upon his civilian experience. And there's another angle to the Standby Reserve which is not quite so realistic. You workers can derive much personal satisfaction from belonging. It's a good outfit, the Seabees. You'll be proud to be one. The reserve is slanted especially to young, skilled and semi-skilled workers, the trade union apprentices and journeymen. They are the ones who will benefit most by the Standby Reserve. But veteran Seabees, men with World War II experience, are wanted as recruits in the Standby Reserve. Many of them now have the experience to make chief petty officer rates. The Seabee Standby Reserve needs the know-how of those veterans who made "can do" a byword.
You hear what the narrator said? He's giving you a good tip. The Seabee Reserve's a good deal.